What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 schedule preview projected record series. The Nebraska Cornhuskers are up next. Here was the schedule from 2022 for Nebraska. 4-8. Again, got off to that bad start. Struggled against North Dakota. Lost to Georgia Southern. Scott Frost was out. They did bounce back, beat Indiana and Rutgers, and then lose 5 straight before beating Iowa to close things out. You look at this schedule, they did have Oklahoma in the non-conference. You look at their games against the East, they had Indiana and Rutgers and then Michigan. So that wasn't the toughest draw. They didn't have the toughest schedule last year. And remember, Oklahoma turned out to be a team that barely made it to a bowl game, and they got them at home. So it was a pretty bad year, given that this schedule really wasn't horrible for them last year. Let's look at the 2023 schedule, and these are the games they'll play outside of the division. They'll play on the road at Colorado, Northern Illinois, and Louisiana Tech. Those will be the non-conference games. And then in the games against the East, it's a little bit tougher than last year. They'll have Michigan at home. They'll have Michigan State on the road. Could be a tricky game there. And then Maryland at home. Maryland brings a lot back, so that could be a challenge there. So no Indiana or Rutgers this year, but still, you don't have Ohio State, you don't have Penn State, so it's not the toughest draw. And then you look at the non-conference schedule, not horrible. Of course, Colorado is a big wild card. Don't really know what to expect from them. But let's go week by week and take a look at this schedule. They open up on the road at Minnesota on a Thursday night. That'll be a tough one there, tough place to play. It's always tough to go on the road in those weeknight games. Plus, it's week 1 with a new coaching staff. It's hard to say what to expect in that game, but I think it will be a challenge for Nebraska. And then Colorado, another game that we just don't know what to expect. 2 new coaching staffs. Colorado's roster is going to look totally different. Nebraska's will look a lot different as well. It's on the road at Colorado. They're going to be fired up for that game, so that'll be a tough one, but a winnable game, I think, for Nebraska potentially. Then they have Northern Illinois on September the 16th and Louisiana Tech on September 23rd. They will close out the month of September with a home game against Michigan. So if they're able to go on the road and beat Minnesota and Colorado, then there's a pretty good chance they could start off 4-0 before playing Michigan. But if you lose to Minnesota and Colorado on the road, then it's 2-2 potentially. And again, then you're getting into the main part of the Big Ten schedule. So Michigan there on the 30th. Then they go on the road to face Illinois on October the 7th. That could be a tough one there. They get their bye week after Illinois, so right there in the middle of the season. Not really before a big game, though. They'll play Northwestern next. They get them at home this year. Back-to-back home games. They'll play Purdue next on October 28th. That's a winnable game, a couple winnable games there, you would think. Then it's on the road at Michigan State. Pretty tough place to play. Michigan State, of course, was down last year, so we'll see how good they are. Maryland on November the 11th. That'll be a home game for Nebraska. That one could be a challenge as well. Then it's Wisconsin on November 18th on the road. Tough place to play. Luke Fickell it's going to be a totally different looking Wisconsin team this year. Interesting that Nebraska plays Colorado and Wisconsin, 2 teams that probably will look more different than any other teams in college football next year, just because of the new coaching staffs and the philosophy changes and all of that. But that'll be a tough one there against Wisconsin, and then they finish up with Iowa on the Friday after Thanksgiving. They get that game at home. And so again, you look at the schedule. The question first is, can they get to a bowl game? Well, you've got Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Northwestern, Purdue. Those 4 games, you feel pretty confident about those 4 games. But then they're going to have to win some tough ones. They're going to have to go on the road and beat Minnesota, Colorado, Michigan State. Going to have to win a couple of those games potentially, or beat a pretty good Maryland team, beat Wisconsin or Iowa. Again, the schedule, it's not horrible. The non-conference, the only real challenge, I guess you could say, is Colorado. And then you don't have to play Ohio State or Penn State out of the East, but still, it's a pretty challenging schedule here for Nebraska to get back to a bowl game. They're going to have to win some close games, going to have to win some big games. And if they can do that, I think there is a chance with this schedule that you could definitely see the Huskers back in the postseason and making it to a bowl game. Projection last year for Nebraska was 7-5. That's what our projection was. I personally picked this team to go 9-3. So yeah, I was way off on Nebraska. They were a major disappointment, but A lot of excitement heading into this season. We'll see if they can turn it around. But let's see what the projection looks like. This is the scale that we use. If it's a 50-50 game, it'll be in the white. That means it's a game where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. Under 20, over 80, those are games where I think the spread will be 20 or more points. 20-29, 71-80, those are games where I think it'll be a double-digit spread, 10-19 points. 30-39%, 61-70%, those are games where I think the spread will be about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 points. And so for Nebraska, we start with the easy wins, and I think you can count Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech as easy wins. I realized last year they lost to a Group of 5 team, but Nebraska should be better than these teams, and they should be favored by probably 20, 24 points, somewhere in that range. Maybe it's 16-18, and maybe this one should be in the blue. One of these should be in the blue. But either way, it would be counted as a win here in the projection. So those are your easy wins. Now we move on down the list to the games where I think Nebraska will be favored by about a touchdown. Colorado's interesting with Deion Sanders taking over, obviously. It's going to be a totally different team, totally different roster. The game is on the road for Nebraska. You can maybe call that a 50-50 game. Maybe they're not favored by 6 or 7 points. But just looking at where the teams were last year, Colorado was so bad. I don't know if they're going to turn things around that quickly, even though it will be a totally different team. That's a tough one to predict. I don't know what Vegas will be thinking there. Probably depends on how the teams play in their first game. But I think Nebraska, again, based off of last year, they will be favored by maybe 6 points. And then Northwestern, they should be favored. I know they lost to Northwestern last year, but after that game, Northwestern really went downhill, and really not a whole lot of reason for optimism for Northwestern this year. Nebraska playing at home, they should be favored by 7 or 8 points in that game. All right, how about the games where they'll be a clear underdog? Michigan, I think they're going to be double-digit underdogs in that game. Michigan's going to be really, really good, a top 4 team again, more than likely. It's a home game for Nebraska. Maybe that gives them a chance to make it somewhat interesting, but I really feel like Michigan will be favored by 17, 18 points in this game, and it's one that's going to be very tough for Nebraska to win. Okay, how about the rest of the schedule? And this is what you get in the Big Ten West, and with every Big Ten West team we do, we're really counting all the games as 50-50 games, all the Big Ten West games, except for Northwestern, because the rest of these teams, there's really no separation. You know, I think there's a chance that Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, maybe those 3 teams rise up to the top of that division. But Illinois surprised us last year. Purdue, a lot of question marks for them. How good will they be? Minnesota, usually pretty solid. So it's really tough to try to figure out the Big Ten West. And so we just throw them all in there and say that these games will be 50-50. And then Michigan State, I think Nebraska probably the better team there, but it's on the road. I think that makes that one a 50-50 game as well, which means half the schedule for Nebraska is 50-50. And that's really been the story the last couple of years. They've got a lot of games that they've got to have a chance to win. They just haven't been able to win those games. They've lost so many close games, especially back in 2021. If they're going to have a good season, they're going to have to win close games. They're going to have to go on the road and maybe beat a Minnesota or an Illinois or Michigan State. Take care of business at home against Maryland, Purdue, beat Iowa again. I mean, can they do that? That's the question. And then you can't slip up and lose to Colorado or Northwestern. And that's how you lose those games. You lose a lot of close games to 50-50 games. And the next thing you know, you're not going to a bowl game again. So what we're going to do here is to get the projection, we average out the games. The games in purple are counted as 65%. Games in white is 50%. Games in the green are counted as wins. The Michigan game is counted as a loss. And then we average all that out. And the projection comes out 7-5. So same projection as last year, and that kind of makes sense. Again, when we just throw all the Big Ten West basically into one category and call them all 50-50 games, that's what you're going to get. So that's the same projection for Nebraska this year is 7-5. Obviously, they have not lived up to the projections the last couple of years. Will that change? Well, we'll see. But again, our projection for Nebraska in 2023 is 7-5.